Hi again, everyone. Thank you again for joining. For those who are new to our community call, welcome. We're really happy to have you. And today on our call, I will be moderating and we'll be joined by a couple folks on the SEARAC team, including Quyen Dinh, our Director of California Policy and Programs, Alyssa Tillibut, our Training Manager, and Katrina Dizon-Mariategui, our Director of National Policy. We're super excited that you all are able to join us today. We know that you have a lot in this really heavy season. So to begin, we'll start with just a couple logistics. Just to remind folks that all attendees are placed on mute during the conversation. But if you'd like to make a comment or ask a question at any time, make sure that you're logged into the webinar and make sure that you also see your question and comments tab, where you can feel free to send me any questions or comments that we'll share here on the SEARAC team to make sure that we respond to folks. And also as a reminder that we'll be recording this webinar and also sharing it by social media later this week. And finally, you'll also see a handouts tab where our PowerPoint today is included, as well as a lot of the handouts and resources that will be shared. So just wanted to share that with folks before we got started. And because we really like to know who from our community is joining us, we'd like to add in lots of polls for opportunities to engage. So our first poll today is asking folks, where are you joining us from today? And we'll go ahead and get that started. And we'll give folks just a couple, about 30 more seconds. Great. So it looks like we have an even mix of folks from the East Coast and West Coast. Thank you, West Coast folks, for joining us during your lunch. And also a mix of Midwest and South Coast. So we're really glad that we have representation from across the country for today's call. And for our next question, we're also curious if you are a first-time attendee to our community call or if you've been on multiple. And so we'd love to ask, how many community calls have you attended from SEARAC? And we'll give you just about 30 seconds. Okay, 10 more seconds for folks. Any final folks who want to weigh in? Great. Well, go ahead and close the poll. And it looks like most of us have been joining us actually one or two times, and there are folks who've been here 4 or more. And we also have folks who are joining us for the first time. So we have a great mix of folks who are joining us, and we're really appreciative of being able to share with you some of the work that we've been up to the past couple months and looking ahead. So for today's call, we'll start with some reflections from myself around celebrating APA Heritage Month, and then we'll go into the bulk of our call to give updates around the threats that we've been seeing under this administration, policy highlights at the national and state level, as well as ending on census mobilization, ways that folks can take action, and then making sure we have time for questions and answers and comments from you all at the end as well. And so with that, I was asked to just share some reflections as we round out May, being Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. And for my reflection, I really wanted to honor a couple folks who have been really critical to SEARAC's story and the Southeast Asian American experience. One of the folks that I really want to honor are the original caretakers of SEARAC, meaning the folks who founded SEARAC in 1979 to respond to the biggest refugee crisis that the world had ever seen. And one of the major milestones of the organization at the time was passing the 1980 Refugee Act, which allowed for folks like my parents to arrive as refugees from Vietnam, and today for SEARAC to represent the largest community of refugees ever to be resettled in America. I very much honor the courage that it took them to respond to this atrocity that had happened in our countries, and also the leadership that they modeled by transferring the leadership of American humanitarians to Southeast Asian American leaders. And today I'm the 4th executive director. And in my reflection, I also think about the other AAPI allies who have been so critical to SEARAC's work, including folks who have served on our board of directors, folks who have introduced us to new partnerships and new coalitions, and folks on the Hill to really make sure that we are creating space within the API community by showing that their role was really building out our self-determination as a Southeast Asian American community, and demonstrating how the community itself can continue to expand and grow as a result of our diversity and our intentionality in building leadership, and really responding to the needs of our communities. And finally, we really also honor our first generation of refugees, including folks like my parents, survivors of war and genocide, who left their countries not knowing if they would live or die so that today we could be free. And that legacy is one that we hope to continue honoring in our future, as SEARAC also celebrates not just our 40th year anniversary as an organization, but also our 2nd annual Moving Mountains Equity Summit Conference, where our theme is really focused on creating home by healing, connecting, innovating, and activating. And our hope is that through spaces like Moving Mountains, that SEARAC continues to build on our founders' legacies and our parents' and grandparents' legacies as they create home here in America, as they create home in America here for us, and as we will continue to do so for generations to come. And our hope is that we do that with deep love and resilience as our roots as refugees. And those reflections help us to segue into our national policy work, where SEARAC continues to be the only national civil rights organization championing the causes of Southeast Asian American communities, where unfortunately our communities have been continuing to face unique attacks under this Trump administration. And so I'll transition this section over to Katrina to share on these updates and as well as our policy work.
Great, thank you so much, Quyen, and hello to everyone. Thank you for joining our community call. For the folks that have joined previous calls, as you may know, we weren't able to have an April community call, so we wanted to start things out real quick by sharing a quick summary of some threats that we saw in April and May coming out of the Trump White House. In the next few slides, we'll be highlighting some key things that SEARAC has been doing to monitor these attacks, to fight back, and to also review opportunities for those of you who want to be engaged on some of these key issues. So first of all, there has been a recent proposal by the Trump administration to make it more difficult for immigrants to become citizens through proposing limitations on granting fee waivers for low-income immigrants wanting to naturalize. Under current regulations, the government permits immigrants below specific income levels applying for a limited number of benefits to have the fees associated with filing for citizenship applications be waived. This waiver really does go a long way for many low-income immigrants to become U.S. citizens. This proposed rule by the administration, however, would cut this criteria, making naturalization more inaccessible for immigrant communities. Overall, the Southeast Asian foreign-born population has naturalized at higher rates compared to other immigrant communities, but naturalization still remains a critical need for those who are eligible but lack the monetary resources, knowledge, language, ability, and access they need to become citizens. According to 2013 census data, about 6 to to 74% of Cambodian, Lao, Hmong, and Vietnamese individuals were born abroad and have naturalized, compared to only 46% of individuals overall. However, only 18% of eligible Cambodians, 11% of eligible Laotians, and 16% of eligible Vietnamese green card holders naturalized, which means that a sizable proportion of our community still faces barriers to naturalization. Not naturalizing poses several risks to Southeast Asian American community members. Longtime lawful permanent residents, for example, are vulnerable to deportation if they don't become U.S. citizens. Additionally, low-income seniors who do not naturalize risk losing access to critical benefits such as supplemental security income. Because of these reasons, SEARAC submitted a comment to oppose this proposal, and you can feel free to email me at katrina@searac.org if you would like to see a copy of our comment and would like more context on this current proposal. The next piece is around public charge. For those of you who have been partners of SEARAC, you know that last year we mobilized our community to collect over 600 comments opposing a Trump administration proposal to basically deny green cards to immigrants who use public benefits as a means of survival. This month, or I suppose it would be June, so next month, we're hearing that the administration is planning to submit another proposal that could punish immigrants who use public benefits with deportation. Under the current law, it is extremely difficult for immigrants to be deported simply for using public benefits. However, under this proposal, this could change. Unfortunately, we have not yet seen the details of this proposal. And while there are legal limitations to how far the administration can go to impose this, we know that the terror of just hearing this news will likely scare many immigrants from accessing the critical benefits they need to ensure that their families are healthy and thriving. For more information on this issue, there's an FAQ on this proposal from the Protecting Immigrants Family that is attached in the handout section of this webinar. So you can feel free to download that in the handout section for more information. Again, this proposal has not yet been formally submitted for comment, but we are working with our partners to monitor updates on this proposal, and we will be keeping our community posted on any developments we see in the next few months. Lastly, we had mentioned, I think in our March community call, that the Trump administration is continuing to fight for the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. The Trump Department of Justice recently issued a court filing in support of a lower court ruling to completely invalidate the ACA. In contrast to past efforts by the administration to eliminate provisions of this Obama-era rule, this signals a much more drastically aggressive approach to completely eliminate the policy altogether. Prior to the Affordable Care Act, Southeast Asian Americans experienced some of the highest uninsured rates in the nation, but upon the implementation of the ACA and Medicaid expansion, uninsured rates were cut in half by 2015. And because the ACA requires essential benefits to be covered by all health insurance plans, Southeast Asian Americans have been able to access care that is critical to their well-being, such as improved access to women's health care like maternity, prenatal care, contraceptive coverage, and women-specific preventive care. SEARAC will continue to monitor this attack on the ACA as it makes its way up to the Supreme Court. But in the meantime, we encourage folks to consider reaching out to your lawmakers to express why the ACA matters to you and your community and why it needs to be protected. So while we recognize that, fighting back against bad policy is important, we also recognize that it is also equally critical to be advancing policies that will really be beneficial to improving the lives of our families and our community members. So in this section, we'll be reviewing some new bills introduced in Congress by our progressive House majority and some of our champions in the Senate. So this month, Representatives Pramila Jayapal and Adam Smith of Washington, together with Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey, reintroduced the Dignity for Detained Immigrants Act, legislation that would limit ICE detention, improve facilities through increased oversight, and the use of private detention facilities, and also establish alternatives to detention. Since 1998, over 16,000 Southeast Asian Americans have been issued final orders of removal. But due to the unique relationship between the U.S. and the Cambodian, Laos, and Vietnamese government, many are often detained for prolonged periods of time as the U.S. government tries to convince host countries to remove them. And to illustrate how this bill would benefit Southeast Asian Americans, we wanted to uplift the story of Nam Nguyen. He was an LAT 2017 alumni, and he was our spokesperson when this bill was first introduced back in 2017. Nam fled Vietnam as a child and grew up with no parents to care for him. After being transferred from one group home to another in a low-income neighborhood in Southern California, he was arrested at the age of 17 after getting into a verbal altercation at a pool hall where he was hanging out with his friends. Shots were fired, and although nobody was hurt, Nam and 11 other people were charged with assault with a firearm. In 1997, Nam was detained for 4 years after violating his probation until the Supreme Court mandated his release. Today, Nam has completely turned his life around. He started a family and dedicated himself to the Christian faith by becoming a pastor. So the Dignity for Detained Immigrants Act would help immigrants and former refugees like Nam be able to make sure that they are, when in detention, are making sure that there are humane standards within those facilities. So with that, we wanted to pose a poll question to our community members. Which of the following aspects of immigrant detention do you feel hurts Southeast Asian immigrants the most? Would it be lack of access to medicine and health facilities, lack of quality food, lack of humane living quarters, lack of oversight of detention personnel, or high cost of goods? And I know it's difficult to choose since all of them are such difficult issues. But for folks that do have experiences with loved ones or community members, if you could share which of these issues you think would matter the most to them, that would be great. So we'll give folks a few seconds. Maybe just 10 more seconds, and then we'll close our poll. Check out the results. Okay, so more than half of you said lack of humane living quarters is a main issue, and then 45% on lack of detention oversight. So thank you so much for that feedback. It does help us to ensure that we are supporting policies that would benefit many of our Southeast Asian immigrant family members and community members. So the next piece is around what we're seeing around the battle on the Affordable Care Act and access to quality health care in Congress. This month, Congress passed a bill called the Protecting Americans with Pre-Existing Conditions Act. It was a bill spearheaded by Representative Custer of New Hampshire to block a major aspect of the Trump administration's agenda to allow insurance companies to sell junk insurance plans that discriminate against Americans with pre-existing conditions. In addition, the Strengthening Healthcare and Lowering Prescription Drug Costs Act, a bill that was composed of 7 health bills, were voted out of committee last month and also passed out of the House. Building off of the successes of the Affordable Care Act, these package of bills would block, again, the administration's efforts to allow insurance companies to sell junk insurance plans. It would also restore funding for ACA outreach and enrollment, and it would also lower the cost of prescription drugs. So while House Democrats are working to protect health coverage for many Americans, the White House has already threatened to veto some of these efforts, making it clear that their intention to gut the healthcare quality and protection of our community is really at the top of their agenda. SEARAC continues to support these efforts by House Democrats to protect the ACA because it's been a source of affordable quality health coverage for many Southeast Asian families. So to, again, just demonstrate impact, in 2017, SEARAC launched a comment card collection campaign to hear from community members on how the Affordable Care Act and the expansion of Medicaid has really impacted their lives, and to really understand the importance of protecting this critical policy. So we had like one Southeast Asian respondent share that as a survivor of Cambodians, they suffered from a variety of health issues, and how they were thankful that ACA supported with their ability to access care for a number of these issues. With that, we wanted to pose another poll for the community. Do you know someone who would benefit from the bills that I had mentioned earlier? So around making sure that there is quality health coverage for those with pre-existing conditions, making sure that there is outreach and marketing being done around the ACA to increase enrollment, and also lowering prescription drug prices. So if you know of anyone in your community or yourself that would benefit from this, we would definitely love to hear from you. And we'll give folks a few seconds, and then we'll share the results. So great. Let's close the poll and see what the results say. All right. So wow, 50% say someone from the community, and 43% all of the above. 7% a no, or I need more information. So once again, thank you so much for sharing. It really does validate these critical policies that SEARAC continues to monitor on behalf of our families and community members. So next is around some updates around census, and we shared this in our April community call, but wanted to share it for others who might not have been able to join. So as we shared previously, we know that oral arguments around the possibility of adding a citizenship question to the census began last month. According to experts, the addition of this question would lead to a 6.5 million undercount, and this is a conservative estimate. And this would mainly be concentrated in urban areas with high populations of immigrant communities, leaving many white rural areas relatively untouched. So, this will really have a huge bearing on which states are likely to gain or lose seats in the House of Representatives, which could really impact political power. According to research, the states that would likely be most negatively impacted if there was an undercount of non-citizens would be California and New York, and they would potentially lose one congressional seat. If all non-citizens altogether were completely disregarded, Texas and Florida would lose at least one seat as well. A final decision on this matter should be made by June of this year, so by next month. Additionally, Congresswoman Lori Trahan of Massachusetts, specifically of Lowell, Massachusetts, championed a letter to the Census Bureau just this past month, signed by 39 representatives, to request additional funding to support the phone and online translation of census materials in Hmong, Lao, and Cambodian. While our Vietnamese community members are already slated to have this translation support available to them, the Congresswoman wanted to ensure that the same support was extended to other Southeast Asian community members as well. According to the 2017 American Community Survey, 39.5% of Cambodians, 32.9% of Hmong, and 37.6% of Lao households spoke English less than very well. In addition, more than 14% of these communities live in poverty. Because of these challenges that make these communities hard to reach and thus hard to count, it is really crucial that all reasonable measures be taken to reduce language barriers that might otherwise prevent an accurate count from being performed. So we really thank Representative Trahan for her leadership in this issue, and we are going to be continuing to work with members on the Senate side to push a similar letter as well. With that, we wanted to poll folks to help inform some of our census education strategy work. What kind of information on census would be the most helpful for SEARAC to create resources on? So would it be info on what folks gain by participating in census, info on what folks will miss out on by not participating in census, FAQs addressing community concerns on census, tutorials or means on how to fill out the census, or you're not sure? And we know it's difficult to choose between all of these, but your feedback would be critical in helping SEARAC to prioritize what resources we want to make sure we're creating for the community. So we'll give folks a few seconds, and then we'll close the poll and check out the results. Okay, maybe 10 more seconds. Okay, let's check out the results. Oh, split. Wow, evenly split. You guys are making this hard for us. So it seems like what folks have to gain as well as what folks have to lose is as critical as knowing FAQs on community concerns. And it seems like the tutorials on how to fill it out doesn't seem to be as much of a need. So again, thank you so much. Your feedback really is critical in making sure that the work we're doing does really resonate with our community. So with that, I wanted to hand it over to Goia, who is our California Director of Policy and Programs, to give us an update on what's going on in California.
Thank you so much, Katrina. Hi, everyone. Thank you again for taking the time out of your busy day to tune into our call. I'm really glad to be able to provide updates on SEARAC California's budget and policy priorities today. So as mentioned earlier, under this administration, we've seen continuous attacks on our communities, regardless of the issue area, regardless of our population. And my hope is to really share out SEARAC California's budget and policy advocacy priorities as areas for our California listeners to get involved, but also to inspire folks across the country to think about, possible model legislation that you can be, exploring with your respective state legislators to ensure that there's protection for our communities across the country. So I'm actually going to start off with California's budget advocacy. And as a recap, we've been conducting census community outreach and education advocacy. As census is the only national body of data that disaggregates some of our Southeast Asian data, we heavily rely on the data set to help us tell various Southeast Asian stories and also advocate for appropriate resources that we need to address systematic concerns, right? So last year, our former governor, Governor Brown, and the state legislature, they approved a budget of $90.3 million to be allotted to the counties as well as various regions of the state and also statewide CBOs to ensure that there is kind of across the state census community outreach and education. This year in January, our new governor, Governor Newsom, included in his proposed budget an additional $54 million for census outreach. So in partnership with the Census Policy Advocacy Network, as well as other advocates like Chinese for Affirmative Action, we have been asking for a total of $93.4 million this year for census community education and outreach. And so let's hope that we get there. In regards to health, in January, Governor Newsom included in his proposed budget $134 million to expand full scope Medi-Cal for undocumented adults ages 19 to 25. SEARAC, along with other health advocacy organizations, as well as immigrant rights organizations, have been in full support, and we have also been supporting two other bills to ensure that Medi-Cal is expanded beyond ages 19 to 25. So we are continuing to advocate on this piece as well. And then lastly, in terms of our budget advocacy is education. So we've been working in partnership with the College for All Coalition in California to ensure that the state renews a state-funded college readiness block grant, which is asking for $200 million that would go into the K through 12 public local education agencies to prepare students to be college ready. And then also $20 million will go to the University of California campuses to enhance the recruitment and retention programs, especially for low-income and foster youth students, to ensure that they're being retained and that they graduate. And then lastly, to also create 25,000 additional enrollment slots at the UC system for low-income and foster youth students. So the update is that Governor Newsom in California shared his revised budget, and it's called the May Revise, on May 10th. We did not see that he met us with our budget ask, and we have been actually advocating and engaging with the state legislature to meet our budget ask. So what's going to happen is that next week, the Senate and Assembly budget committees are actually going to be meeting with each other to develop their final version of the state budget, and then after that, they will be meeting with the governor's office to approve and adopt the final 2019-2020 budget by June 15th, which is just, in a few weeks. So we'll have more updates for you all in the next community calls in terms of where we have been able to fall in our budget advocacy requests, especially around census. And then I'm going to move over to the next slide. And wanted to also share with everybody that at the same time, it's not a budget ask, but what some of the advocates along with SEARAC has been working on is advocating to the California Census Office on how to ensure that, we are reaching small language groups and also language groups or LEP population who are not necessarily literate in their own languages, right? So we see that happen often in our Hmong and Mien population. And so we have seen that the California Census Office released their Language and Communication Access Plan. This is like their second draft. We're hoping it's not the final draft, and they released it on Friday, May 17th. I also included the plan in the handouts for your reference. And just wanted to quickly highlight that in this language plan, the California Census Office is committed to providing translated materials for the top 12 non-English languages in California, which includes Vietnamese and Khmer. And then their language plan will also require the contractors, like the state contractors, which are the regional CBOs as well as the state CBOs, as well as the counties, to provide language support for languages spoken by more than 1,500 people in their regions. So the Southeast Asian languages required, depending on the region and counties in California, and you'll see it in the handout, includes Hmong, Ewe Mien, Khmer, and Vietnamese. Unfortunately, the Lao language did not meet the threshold trigger that was developed by the California Census Office, but we do know that there are a lot of efforts, in Sacramento and Fresno, where community-based organizations and counties are really developing strategies to ensure that linguistically appropriate outreach to the Lao community is happening. So if you're, interested in wanting to learn more about this particular language access plan, or want to learn more about, how do we get more of our communities involved on the local level, definitely feel free to contact me. My email is goia@searac.org. And then moving into our policy priorities, I wanted to start with updates on our Assembly bill. It's our SEARAC co-sponsor Assembly Bill 512, which is authored by Assembly Member Ting, and it's our Cultural Competence and County Mental Health Bill. So the bill will require California counties to report their cultural competency plans and require the California Department of Healthcare Services to review and monitor the improvement and mental health disparities reduction. As of now, there isn't any sort of accountability. There are counties who are submitting their plans, but there isn't any sort of accountability in terms of how it's being monitored and ensuring that there's improvement. So we're excited that this bill has been moving along. The process, it will also require that the county cultural competency committees be staffed with, clients, so like our own communities, advocates, providers, as well as, any sort of local experts that addresses disparity reduction. And then also, what's really important around this bill is that it would also require the county mental health to really think about, what are the community-defined practices to reach our communities. Because oftentimes, it's about data-driven, it's about evidence-based, and there are still some community-defined practices that are not yet, proven evidence-based, but we want to make sure that the community-defined practices is also included. So for example, like gardening or going for group walks or whatnot, like those are things that we have seen are impactful. And so we want to ensure that we're pushing, the mental health offices to really expand the way they're thinking about their services. And so this bill has made it out of Assembly Appropriations. Appropriations is usually one of the hardest committees for these bills to come out of. And so we're really excited that it came out of Appropriations and will be heard on the Assembly floor for a final count before it moves to the Senate. So moving into our first California poll, my question to you all is, are you directly impacted by mental health and or know someone who is impacted? And definitely feel free to check all that applies. So yes, myself, I'm directly impacted. Yes, I know someone who is directly impacted. Yes, I am a service provider. No, or I don't know. So just go ahead and take a few seconds to fill that out. Awesome. Okay, so looking at the summary, oh wow, so there's almost all of us know someone who's directly impacted, and then there's also more than half of us who are directly impacted, and then some of us are service providers. Thank you so much to the service providers. And then there's about a small percentage that is not directly impacted nor knows anyone that is directly impacted, which is probably a good thing. So thank you so much for that. This is really helpful for us. And yes, this is for me to set myself up and ask you, if you're from California and if you're Southeast Asian, we definitely want to hear from you. Whether you're directly impacted, whether you know someone who is directly impacted, or whether you are a provider or even a researcher. We want to ask you if you would please fill out our story collection survey. And, our hope really is to be able to define community-defined best practices, identify resources that our communities need here in California, and then also really be able to hear from the community about what culturally relevant mental health services and language access looks like. And so we have been, we launched our story collection where we're going to go for maybe 2 months, and then we're hoping to come out with a summary to share with you all, and really utilize this report as a way to, share with our local or even statewide policymakers and stakeholders about what our Southeast Asian communities need. So for more information or questions or just wanting to, get more involved, definitely feel free to contact our California Policy Associate, Lee Lowe, and her email address is lee@searac.org. Cool. Okay, I'm almost done, you guys. So moving on to the next portion. The next two bills are ethnic studies related bills. So the first one is Assembly Bill 331, which is the ethnic studies high school graduation requirement. In short, this bill will require ethnic studies course become a high school graduation requirement for public high schools, which will also include charter schools by the year 2024-2025. And, we really care about this bill because we have been working with a lot of Asian American and Pacific Islander youth organizations through our Charge Coalition. And we have seen that in the past years, the young people have been saying that, ethnic studies is something that they really want because it really builds self-determination within themselves, but also really provides an opportunity for the young folks, you know, regardless of ethnic background or racial background, really allows them the opportunity to learn about each other. And we have seen that it has increased commitment to school. It has also addressed like some of the bullying that happens because of the assumptions that come with different racial groups or ethnic groups. And this bill has moved out of Assembly appropriations and will be heard on the Assembly floor as well. The next bill is Assembly Bill 1393, which is our Laotian Histories and Cultural Studies, which kind of goes hand in hand with the one that I just talked about. This bill would require California's Department of Education's Instructional Quality Commission to develop and submit to the state board a model curriculum of the history and cultural study of the various refugee communities that have come from Laos. And the bill is asking for the model curriculum to be developed by December 2022. And this bill has also moved out of Assembly appropriations and will be heard on the Assembly floor. So moving to the next slide, as mentioned in previous calls, the California Department of Education had been convening an Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum Committee consisting of experts and teachers to develop California's Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum. They met in February, March, and April, and I believe the committee has since expired. Recently, the Instructional Quality Commission released an unofficial model of the curriculum that they developed, and it's public. And we will be reviewing the curriculum model to provide a response. So if you're interested in learning more or weighing in on the Southeast Asian specific curriculum, please don't hesitate to contact Gabriel or myself. And I believe public comments are going to be open from June and will close in August. And I believe there is a participant on the call who can also expand more on the Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum. So I will be calling on your help if there are questions around there. And then lastly, I wanted to share out another Assembly bill that I haven't shared with you all in the past, and it's Assembly Bill 1282. It is the No Private ICE Act, authored by Assembly Member Ash Kalra. And so this bill would prohibit an officer, an employee, a contractor, or an employee of a contractor of the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, also known as CDCR, from facilitating or allowing private security guards to arrest, detain, or take into custody an individual for immigration enforcement purposes. So, you know, we've seen a lot of our detained Southeast Asian American community members who are granted release. They are then like arrested at prison as soon as they are released. And they're arrested at prison sites by private contractors of ICE, right? And reports have indicated that these community members, as well as other communities impacted by these immigration policies, have been violently harmed by private security guards during the process. And so this bill is really to eliminate having these private contractors. And, you know, we're really appreciative of the leadership from Asian Law Caucus, who has been the main sponsor of this bill. And this bill has moved swiftly out of the Assembly floor and will be heard on the Senate Public Safety Committee. So if you're interested in learning more about this particular bill, feel free to contact me. There are opportunities to weigh in as well. So moving into our last California specific poll question, I wanted to ask y'all, what California issue areas resonate with you the most? And feel free to check all that applies. So we have census, mental health, college access, ethnic studies, or the intersection, crimmigration. Okay, and just a couple more seconds, and then we'll go ahead and close out. And I understand not everyone is here from California. So looking at our results, wow, we have a large majority of us who where census and mental health definitely resonates with you, but at the same time, college access, ethnic studies, and even immigration are very important issues. So we will keep up the good work, the hard work. Definitely need your support in terms of weighing in. You know, our California State Legislature needs to hear more from our Southeast Asian community. So if you're kind of, you know, just more curious and want to get more involved, feel free to contact myself or Gabriel, whose contact is in here, as well as Lee. And thank you so much for your time. I will pass it back to my colleagues in DC.
Thanks, Goia. Thanks so much for sharing out on all the work that the California team is juggling. Now I just wanted to transition to our community education and mobilization strategies for the 2020 census. As we prepare for census, we'll be creating messaging and resources to share with the community to support with your education and mobilization. So I first wanted to start out with some great data that was shared by the City University of New York Graduate Center. We were able to get information on hard-to-count tracts around the country disaggregated by different Southeast Asian American ethnic groups. So just to define hard-to-count tracts for folks on the call, it's defined as areas in the country with the bottom 20% of mail return rates from the 2010 census. So using this information, we found the following data on Southeast Asian American groups based on 2010 census. So as you can see in the bar graphs, Hmong, Lao, and Vietnamese populations all hover at around 20 to 25%. So anywhere from 1/5 to 1/4 of that population are living in hard-to-count tracts. And then for Cambodian population, that number is higher, around about 1/3 of that population is in hard-to-count tracts. So we further wanted to get a little bit more detailed. So in terms of the Cambodian population, based on the 2010 census, the top 10 states who had the highest proportion of the Cambodian population in hard-to-count tracts were Massachusetts, New York, Louisiana, Rhode Island, and Pennsylvania, who all hover over half of that population is in hard-to-count tracts. And then Oklahoma, California, Connecticut, Kansas, and Tennessee all range anywhere from about 1/3 to 38% in hard-to-count tracts. Additionally, we have data on the Hmong population. So the same metric, the top 10 states with the highest proportion of the Hmong population in hard-to-count tracts based on 2010 census return rates. Mississippi is above everyone at 100% of the Hmong population in that state is in a hard-to-count tract. West Virginia is at 66.7%, so more than 2/3. And then below that is Alaska, Montana, Nevada, Rhode Island, California, Florida, Oregon, Massachusetts, and Oklahoma. So that is a range of 25% to 47%. So more than 1/4 of that population of the top 10 states. Next up, we'll examine the Vietnamese population. So the top states for this would be Alaska and Massachusetts, who both have over half of the Vietnamese population in hard-to-count tracts. And then between New York, Louisiana, New Hampshire, Nevada, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Mississippi, and Arizona, those states all range from about 1/3 to 40% of the population were in hard-to-count tracts. And then lastly, we'll examine the Laotian population. The top state here would be Wyoming, where 50% of the population is in a hard-to-count tract, and then followed by Nevada, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Alaska, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Tennessee, and New Mexico. And New Mexico at the lowest is already at 36% in hard-to-count tracts. So about 1/3 to 1/2 in the top 10 states are at risk of being undercounted. So I just wanted to poll folks quickly as we develop our messaging and our materials. how are you and your organization planning to be involved with Census? So anywhere from being on the ground organizing, so these are folks who are knocking on doors or hosting phone banks, providing assistance to community members to fill out the census, whether that's in language support or giving folks internet access, circulating and sharing educational materials, so these are fact sheets, social media infographics, or video tutorials. You currently don't have capacity to get involved with Census, which we totally understand, or not yet sure, still figuring out. So just the best, I guess, summary of what you or your organization is planning to do in the coming year. And we'll give folks about 20 seconds. All right, last few seconds before we close. Great, let's see. Okay, great. So 46% of you are going to be on the ground organizing, so that's great. Hopefully we can connect about our Get Out the Count efforts and coordinate all of that together. And then almost a third are going to be circulating and sharing educational materials. So we'll definitely want to stay engaged with you all as we develop our messaging and what works and resonates with community members. And then 8% will like to focus on providing assistance to fill out the census, which is going to be a big deal as well. And then 15 aren't sure yet, so definitely want to keep you all engaged to figure out where we can coordinate with you. So thank you for that info. Next, I wanted to transition a little bit to, as Quinn mentioned, we will be hosting our second biennial equity summit, Moving Mountains 2019. It's going to be held this fall, October 2nd through 4th in Sacramento. So at that, we will be convening about 175 to 200 Southeast Asian American folks, community leaders and change makers, everyone from students to elders. And we're going to be celebrating our theme of Southeast Asian American self-determination. We also, as Quinn mentioned, are guided by our 4 pillars of connection, inspiration, innovation, and activation as we look to 2020 and beyond. Right now, if you want to get involved, we're currently accepting workshop proposals until June 28th, and we're leaving it pretty open and flexible to all the community members' ideas. So these workshops can range from topics about capacity building, community engagement, mind, body, soul, policy and advocacy, diversity, inclusion, and racial equity, artistic expression, or if your idea doesn't fit into one of those categories too neatly, we have a category called Big Ideas that you can throw us your proposals. Session formats are also flexible, so these can be anywhere from 3 60-minute sessions that span 3 days, or they can be 30-minute reflections with a small group. So we're really looking forward to hearing what the community has to propose, and we really want to build on this theme of building home together and creating it with your all's idea at the forefront. Later this month, we will be releasing their scholarship application as well to provide financial assistance to folks, since we know we have a lot of East Coast, Midwest, and Southerners who might be joining, where California might be a little far. So be on the lookout for that, as well as our registration launch. If you are subscribed to our listserv, you should be getting all those updates. For more information in the meantime, you can feel free to visit SEARAC.org/movingmountains. And lastly, I'll just talk about some ways we can engage with you and you can take action. As Katrina mentioned about a census letter that was led by Representative Trahan for additional Southeast Asian American translations for census, you can thank your representative for their leadership if they signed on. We also have an ongoing sign-on letter to share with your organizations if they'd like to sign on to support due process for immigrants at risk of deportation. So as many of you know, SEARAC has been at the forefront in pushing for the repeal of harmful policies passed in 1996 that restricted the due process rights of immigrants in deportation proceedings. So if you'd like to join us and other immigrant rights organizations across the country by signing this letter, we'll be showing support for a needed change to these laws. The letter will be shared with Speaker Pelosi and House Majority Leader Hoyer. A text of the letter is linked in the Google form, and just a reminder, this is an organizational sign-on letter. For a little more detail, the principles of this letter mention ending immigration detention without bail, ending the automatic deportation of individuals who have had contact with the criminal legal system, ending the entanglement of local policing and immigration enforcement, and decriminalizing migration by repealing laws that make migration a crime. So if you're interested in that, information is at that link. Next, if you would like to fill out our census pledge form, this will give you an opportunity to pledge to be counted as well as sign up to be a census ambassador. For our ambassador initiative, these are folks who would like to go the extra mile to help us get out census awareness or get involved with organizations who are really getting out the count in 2020. And then just wanted to, it's not on here, but wanted to reflag California folks, the mental health survey and story collection that Goia had mentioned. And then just in general, for more updates, be sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, sign up for our listserv, and continue to join us for these monthly community calls.
Great, thank you so much, Alyssa and Katrina and Goia, and the awesome SEARAC team. We're running a little bit late, but we have 2 minutes for questions. In case anyone would like to join by audio, please feel free to click on the little raise hand icon that you can see below your orange arrow bar. You can also text us a question in the questions tab. And we do have one question that we had around census, and that was about how do I fill out the census for a family member of mine if they are in prison or in an ICE detention facility?
Okay, so I can answer that question. So even if you have a felony, you'll still be counted. If it's your family member who is currently incarcerated, they will be counted through their quarters. So it won't be on the family to report them in the census. It'll be on wherever they're currently incarcerated.
Great, thank you so much, Alyssa. And if we had other detailed questions like how do I count my baby if I'm pregnant? Are there any other resources that we should go to for that?
Yeah, we can definitely share a bunch of basically scenarios that you might find yourself in and where you would land in terms of filling out the census. We'll be releasing other materials that we create as well as our partners have created to help you navigate Census 2020.
Awesome, thank you so much. And we do have one clarification question for Goia also about census. Goia, you mentioned that the Lao community wasn't included in the thresholds, and the slide looks like it said any populations of 1,500 or more. So just clarifying how the Lao community didn't hit that threshold, knowing that it's a really big population in the state.
Yeah, so the challenging thing is that we know that a lot of the Lao communities have like moved and then or like they have moved around the state of California. So it's also because the threshold are triggered like county by county, which is a challenge. And so it's definitely, it falls into like a recommended language group to consider, but it doesn't fall into the required group that's considered. And I would definitely refer a little bit more to the handout to see like how they came out, like what are the trigger points and how they are kind of playing out in the different counties in California.
Awesome, thanks so much, Goia. And with that, we're officially 1 minute over time. So thank you all so much for joining us today. We will actually be skipping June's call because we'll be hosting our 3-day leadership and advocacy training program. Many of our leaders are actually on this call today, so thank you all so much for joining. We will resume in July, and thank you so much for being part of our community, and we really look forward to continue building with you across the months and years to come. Thank you.